It is time to get into our Constructors Championship predictions. I keep going back and forth with my predictions, but I think I've got something solid that I'm somewhat happy with. We're starting it off with 10th place. My 10th place pick is probably one of my most controversial picks for the year, AlphaTauri. Now, last year, I predicted these guys to finish 4th, and this year, I've got them finishing in P10. Now, reason being, last year, they finished in 9th place. They had a very, very bad start to the season. The end of the season, they picked up some speed. They got a few points, but overall, still finishing 9th. Only ahead of Williams, which, you know, Williams was clearly the bottom team last year. They haven't brought any major changes on their car. In comparison to other teams, their car just looks a little bit lackluster for me. And out on track and testing, it looked really, really rough. Although AlphaTauri did the most laps in testing, I still feel like they didn't have that great of a testing. They were always near the bottom of the timing sheet. You know, just because they did the most laps doesn't mean that they weren't slow and their car wasn't looking great. Although getting a lot of those laps in will help them improve their car coming into these first few races over teams like McLaren and Alpine who didn't get many laps in. I also think they got one of the weakest driver lineups. You know, we got the rookie in Nick de Vries and Tsunoda, one of the worst drivers on the grid at the moment. I just can't see them in the AlphaTauri being able to pull enough points to be able to finish ahead of the teams in front of them. And not to mention the lack of input from the drivers this year to be able to develop their car. But yeah, AlphaTauri, P10. That's my prediction. Next up, I've got Williams finishing in 9th place. Yeah, so last year, I think Williams caught up to the back of the pack. I think comfortably last year, they were the team at the back, 100%. This year, they've caught up, I think, for the reasons I said before with AlphaTauri, specifically Albon. He's going to be able to extract points from that car when the points are available and up for grabs, and that will edge them in front of AlphaTauri. It's going to be so tight between these two teams and the teams ahead of them as well. But yeah, they made good development last year. They went from really far back, worst team on the grid, to kind of in the mix at some races. And I like the route that they've gone with their car this year, and it showed in testing. They had their best testing that they've had in recent years, from lap times to lap count. And now they've got James Vowles on board from Mercedes. You know, having someone as experienced and high class as James at Williams is going to be such a big help this year. But you got to remember, he's only like 8th day on the job, so it's going to take him time to get up to speed. I can't see them placing higher than this. I really hope they do. They look good in testing, but I can't see them getting higher than 9th. 8th place, I have got the Haas boys. Now, reason being, they made good strides last year, but at the same time, they didn't bring many upgrades. I'm not a big fan of Gunter. You know, first race of the season, oh my God, we got a 5th place. Woo, we're so fucking good. Yeah, Viking comeback. And then for the rest of the year, they didn't bring any upgrades. Our focus is on 2023 now. I'm just kind of over hearing Gunter say that. And if they have the same attitude as last year of not bringing many upgrades and focusing on the next year, they will drop behind teams like Williams and AlphaTauri even, but especially the teams in front. So yeah, I can see them maybe finishing a place higher than this potentially, but honestly, if anything, they'll drop further than this. Hülkenberg should, however, be able to do better than what Mick did last year. You know, crash the car less, which has more money, it allows Haas more money to work with, bring home maybe a couple more points than Mick did. But overall, this is down to Magnussen. How many points Magnussen can extract from the car will be how far Haas finished up the pecking order. But yeah, I've got them in 8th this season. One of my most controversial picks of the year again, McLaren, P7. Now, let me explain. I got a lot of notes here for McLaren and why I've got them in P7. They have no confidence in their car. If they don't have fucking confidence, how am I, as a fan, meant to have confidence in their car? Zach Brown and Andrea are sitting there going, we've not hit our marks with our car. We're bringing upgrades in the first few races. Not to mention, Andrea Seidel has left the team. They've now brought Andrea on. You know, that's a very quick turnover. The car was Andreas's car, and now Andrea has had to come on board and deal with those problems. They are 100%, and I stand by this, the least detailed car on the grid. Them and AlphaTauri, but specifically McLaren, they've got this half side pod approach with just, I don't know, nothing on the floor. It doesn't look convincing to me. It might be a good thing that they've lost Andreas Seidel with how bad or rough the car was last year with brakes and just downforce and all that. Maybe it's a good thing that they've lost Andreas, but it's going to take a lot of time to scrape back to where they were in 2021. Last year at Bahrain, they had so many problems with their brakes. Testing this year, they had the same problems with their brakes. I don't know how they've had the same problem for so long and not been able to fix it at all. Like, it feels like they've not even slightly improved the problem. Maybe I am looking too much into testing, but with how they performed at testing, along with what they're saying about the car, it's not looking promising. However, I will say they did improve a lot last year. One of the most improved teams last year. The only reason I have got them in 7th above the teams behind is because of Lando. Lando, I am so confident in, will be able to bring home points to be able to finish in front of the teams behind. If there was another driver in this car other than Lando, I would have them finishing in 9th or 10th this year. Honestly, that's how much lack of confidence I've got with their car. So that means in 6th place, I have got Alfa Romeo, the final team of this bottom 5 tier, as I'd like to call it. Now, reason being, they've got a new management. Audi has taken over majority stake of the team. There's a big cash flow coming in. And also, Andreas has gone from McLaren to Alfa Romeo. Now, I have a lot of respect for Andreas. Obviously, Andreas Sardal, that is. Obviously, Andreas might not have had a good year last year with McLaren, but what he was doing at McLaren to bring it back up to where it was in 2021, he did a great job. And I think maybe having a fresh start at Alfa Romeo and some different people to work around and some new cash flow coming on the team as well, maybe he can do a good job there. They look decent in testing. They look good in testing. They obviously did have that breakdown, but overall, their pace looked really, really good. Bottas is super experienced. You know, everything that happened with him at Mercedes, he can bring over to the team. Zhou is also delivering on, is firing on all cylinders at the end of last year, and hopefully we'll bring that into this year. But for me, I've got Alfa Romeo highest out of this back lot, and it's purely just down to the fact that they look good in testing. They had a decent car last year, and that new management and cash flow from Audi, I think, will help them a lot. Alpine in P5. I've got a lot of confidence in them. Car looks good once again. Last year, they did really, really well. Quick car. Their only problem was the reliability. One thing I am a little bit worried about was they didn't bring anything exceptional to testing, anything brand spanking new that stood out. But that could also be a good thing. They continue to develop on the car they had last year and fix the reliability. That's what they need to do. They got a good lineup, but Gasly is going to take time. You know, they have got a worse lineup than last year, obviously with Alonso leaving, but you know, Gasly isn't terrible. You know, it's not like they've picked up some shitter. Like, Gasly's still going to be able to deliver, but it will take him some time. I just think that if their reliability issues from last year happen again, it's going to cost them too many points. As for them finishing here, it's more about the team in front doing well than them doing bad. So in P4, the biggest jump in last year's predictions, probably, I want to say it's a hot take, but honestly, listening to analysts and listening to what the teams are saying, this isn't very out there of a pick at the moment. And honestly, it's all because of Lawrence. He fucking sold me at their car launch. He is so confident. He spoke so well. And everything he said, I just have faith in. I don't know. Not to mention Dan Fellows from Red Bull. Dan Fellows, technical director now at Aston Martin. He's able to bring all that experience, all that information from Red Bull and bring it to a team like Aston Martin, who have so much fucking money at the moment and are on such an upward trend. They looked amazing in testing. 4th best team in testing. Really good times. The thing I love about Aston is they're not afraid to try something new this year or the last 2 years. You know, oh, we want to try new brake cooling. Oh, we want to try a new side pod. Oh, we want to copy Red Bull. We want to do this. We want to do that. They're really experimenting, and that's what a midfield team with money needs to do. They had great development last year. They have to get on top of their problems, though. That tire pressure issue that they had in the first half of last year took them so long to figure out, but they got a good driver lineup this year. Obviously, Fernando Alonso will extract the maximum out of that car, just like he did with Alpine last year. Super fucking experienced. He's going to be able to bring so much to that team. And Stroll, he's underrated. Stroll wasn't that bad. He's not the worst driver on the grid. Obviously, yes, like I was saying before, he has kind of had his time in Formula 1. Stroll is good at delivering good results in qualifying and races when he wants to. He does need to tidy up his racecraft, but other than that, like, I think they've got a good driver lineup this year. Good car, good technical director. Mike Crack's fucking doing well. First full year of Mike Crack. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. In 3rd place, I have got Ferrari this year. Now, first off, Fred on board, bringing new energy. I fucking love it. Everything that's coming out of Maranello at the moment, in the headlines, from the team itself, It's so good to hear. Fred coming into the office at 8 a.m., going home at 8 p.m., putting his whole heart and soul into bringing this team back to where it needs to be. It's so good to hear. Ferrari's actually bought some nice upgrades on the car that have really improved their car. They've already got an amazing car in general, how well it did last year, specifically on one lap pace. They've got an amazing driver lineup. Leclerc is, you know, top 3 on the grid, and Sainz is very, very consistent. But the problem is, and why I've put them in 3rd behind Mercedes and Red Bull, is ultimately because their tire deck. 23 race season, and there's only a small handful of tracks that suit the Ferrari's high downforce. And their tire deck was awful last year. The amount of Grand Prix, what was it? Roughly off the top of my head, 14 pole positions for Charles Leclerc, and he only converted 3 or 4? That's fucking ridiculous. Their tire deck is so shit, and they couldn't fix it the entire year. And guess what? They've shown up to testing with one of the worst tire degs again this year. Rumor on the street is it's even worse than last year. They had no problems in testing. Once again, 0 problems. 2 years in a row they've done this. The whole of testing, fucking 0 problems. Wow, that looks good, doesn't it? But you want to have your problems in testing so you can see what the problems are and fix them before the races. But yeah, I'm excited for Ferrari this year. I think it's going to be a good 3-way fight, but ultimately in the Constructors Championship, I see these guys finishing behind the other two purely because of the tire deck. P2, we have got Mercedes. I think it's safe to say that P1, you know, Red Bull's P1 for a reason, but we'll talk about Red Bull in a second. Mercedes, why have I put them in P2 above Ferrari? Now, they've gone for the same minimal side pod approach as last year. Everyone last year and even this year still think that minimal side pod approach has the most potential to extract most lap time out of. They brought huge upgrades to the car this year, from the floor to the side pod itself to even the engine cover, front wing. They've really gone at it. They've still kept the same philosophy, but they've gone for a lot of upgrades. However, they didn't look great in testing. They did not look as bad as last year. Last year, they were running in like P6 the entirety of testing. This year, they were just running in 3rd. But it was like, you know, I guess everyone expected Mercedes in testing to be up there with Ferrari and Red Bull, whereas this year they were just in their solid 3rd. So it will be a little bit rough for Mercedes at the start, but with how quick they'll develop, how good of a driver lineup they have, the experience that they have, I think after only a few races they'll be able to be back in front of Ferrari and competing for wins and taking points away from Ferrari. And that's why I've got them in P2 for the constructors. However, if their drivers are able to extract more points out of the car than Perez can, maybe there's a chance they will finish in 1st in the constructors. But yeah, I just don't see that happening. So obviously that leaves Red Bull for 1st place in the constructors for me. They're obviously the best overall in testing. Qualifying pace, I'd still say towards Ferrari, but race pace, so dominant. Set the fastest lap pretty much every single day. Really, really solid amount of laps. Minimal reliability issues. I think Max will just have a similar year to last year. You know, he's currently the best driver on the grid in currently the best car. He'll get so many points, so many wins that even if Mercedes and Ferrari are able to catch up to Red Bull by the halfway point, it's already too late. Max has already done too much damage. And I do think Perez will perform better than last year as well. He got a little bit unlucky at a few races, and I think he's slowly improving. So if Perez finished 2nd in the driver's standings last year and he's improving, then, you know, there's a good chance he'll get even more points this year, which just secures Red Bull's Constructors Championship. I do have a worry for Red Bull though. They haven't gone for much of upgrades, you know, compared to Ferrari, who's changed their side pod and changed a fair few bits on their car, and Mercedes, who's changed a lot of their car. Red Bull hasn't changed much. They've gone, our car's good. Let's not change much of it. Let's just develop it even more. Let's get the weight down. And that's exactly what they've done. That is a bit of a concern because if Mercedes and Ferrari do play the catch-up game, maybe there is a chance Red Bull drop down to 3rd place in the car order. But yeah, that wraps up my 2023 constructor predictions. I hope there's a 3-way fight, but honestly, I can just see Red Bull pulling too much of a lead this year, unfortunately. Unfortunately, in terms of a fan perspective. I think the bottom 5 is going to be where to look this year. The bottom 5, that battle between Aston Martin and Alpine, and that battle between Mercedes and Ferrari, is a lot of good talking points in the constructors this year, and I hope it's another banger because the constructors has honestly been really, really good the last 2 years. So hopefully we get a third year of good constructors battle.